Ball rolling games are a genre that I've always had a strange fascination with. I was drawn to them as a child as I always enjoyed making marble runs and watching marble runs on YouTube. As I watched those videos, I would always end up at some form of ball rolling game. Conceptually, these games are incredibly simple at a base level. You are a ball. Get from the start of the level to the end of the level. This isn't a genre that most people would tend to think about, but there is so much variation within these games that, while they feel connected, they don't come off as clones of each other. Games like Marble Madness, Super Monkey Ball, and Marble It Up are most certainly related to each other, but they all feel unique. I mentioned I was drawn to this genre through early YouTube, and that is true, but one game in particular would always hook me into the ball rolling game rabbit hole. Hamsterball. Hamsterball is a 2004 game released on PC, albeit there was a very short-lived port on XBLA, and it probably is the most pure spiritual successor to the original Marble Madness. It's a very cartoony game with levels that range from, okay, this is manageable, to, they weren't kidding when they called this level impossible! This game, while nowhere near popular enough to be in regular discussions, occasionally shows up in conversations about games that people are nostalgic for. I would imagine that the most prominent example of this game being shown off is when Nathaniel Bandy made a full video covering the game back in 2018. It's the sort of game where most people would forget about its existence, but if you showed it to them, they'd react, oh yeah, that game. I have fond memories of it. But this game isn't the game that this video is about. I'm talking about this game. This is Hamsterball, a 2010 digital-only title for the PlayStation 3. Despite the obvious ties this game makes to the other game, this is a completely different game by a completely different studio. Take Games is responsible for this version with help from Crete Studios. These companies are nearly impossible to find information about, which is really interesting considering Take Games not only has a website, but it's still online to this day. Actually adding this in post, but I also found that Take Games worked on some old Monopoly PC games that I also had as a child. Who are these people? As for other information about these developers, you got me there. Crete Studios was a partially Russian-based video game studio that exists. The most interesting part about this game is that John Raptis, the developer behind the PC Hamsterball, is not mentioned anywhere in this game. Given the similar style of the two games and the fact that this game borrows some levels from that game, the fact that he remains uncredited is a little scummy, I'll admit. I guess I should get this out of the way now. This isn't real hardware. The PS3 that I originally played this game on unfortunately suffered a storm surge a few years ago and no longer works. At least I was able to get all the trophies in the game before it died. Anyways, I'll be emulating this game using RPCS3. It's actually a really good option, and after some tinkering, it works perfectly on PC. I was even able to get it running on my Steam Deck. It runs great there. But how about the game itself? Well, there are a few single-player modes to choose from: Hustle, Stunt, and Trial, as well as two multiplayer modes, Race and Sumo. I'll get three of these modes out of the way first. Those being Stunt, Trial, and Sumo. These are partial rips from Hamsterball on PC, as in 8 of the stages from the PC game are represented in these modes. Those stages are Warm-Up, Beginner, Dizzy, Tower, Up, Neon, Odd, and Glass. Beginner Race was renamed to Cascade, and Expert Arena was ported over. Just the arena, not the stage itself. Other than that, there's not much to mention about these modes. The locations for the arena unlocks were moved, and all the stages use the same music track now. It just feels like a soulless imitation of content that was done better elsewhere, and I personally think the game would be better off without it. Thankfully, that's not the only mode here. The main attraction for Hamsterball on PS3 is the Hustle mode. There are 37 new stages here, swappable hamsters with different abilities, and it's all shown from a behind-the-back camera angle more akin to Marble It Up or Super Monkey Ball. That sounds like a lot. So let's go through it from the start. Practice 1 is a very simple layout with nothing interesting to note. There's not much to avoid, there's some boost arrows to keep it moving, and there's very few places where you can actually fall off. Perfect for getting players accustomed to the controls. Practice 2 is more of the same, but it has a much more interesting layout. There's some split paths and some risk and reward, like here where you have to avoid the holes, but get rewarded for doing so with a faster route to the next section. Immediately after, you can choose to take the safe route, or you can take a ramp to the other side. It ends with these hammers you have to avoid. A solid stage, but keep the stage in the back of your mind as we travel into the main levels proper. As we travel into the main stages, we are also introduced to hamsters with abilities. In the regular stages, you can select between a few hamsters that all have a special ability that you can activate with X. After that, they have a 3-second cooldown. At first, the only one you can use is Jumper. Its ability is simple. You can jump. Jumper is my favorite hamster. You would be surprised how often Jumper can bypass obstacles meant to block certain routes to specific hamsters. Plus, the jump is incredible at maintaining your speed, a topic that we'll delve into later. Bounce 1 has a lot of moving platforms, slingshots, split pathways, and ramps. These mechanics are seen all throughout the game, so it's good that they are introduced here. It's simple, but it's still the beginning of the game, so it makes sense. Tubular 1 is the first stage to introduce actual obstacles. It's still pretty simple, but there's these spinners, these tops, these swinging bars, and these presses. It's still the easiest situation in which you'll see these elements. Maybe with the exception of the tops, which will kill you almost every time you reach them, but you can see where the game is starting to place the seeds for harder levels. Speedway 1 is all about going fast. There are very few obstacles that will actually pose a threat for you. Just go. This is the first stage where Jumper's ability to jump really excels in maintaining your speed. Sections where you're supposed to go slower in can be skipped with a jump, and it's a lot of fun. Although I will note that this layout bears a striking similarity to Tubular 1. These stages are distinct enough that most players won't notice at first, but keep this in mind for later. Bounce 2 is next on the list. It's another simple level and doesn't have too much to talk about. I enjoyed this part at the end where you go through this little maze, then slingshot your way through one of the background balls into a tunnel that takes you to the last stretch of the level. After beating this stage, you get the next hamster, Speedy. You press X, and the ball's acceleration and top speed increase for a short while. In other words, you go fast. This is the most intentionally general-purpose hamster of the bunch. Speedy easily gets the least specific routes to itself. Instead, the hamster's value comes in at being able to take normal routes much faster. I do wish there were a better stage to follow this unlock than Tubular 2. Tubular 2 is even more chaotic than the first Tubular. More obstacles, more tubes, and more using a similar layout to the first Tubular. There are hatches that open up bottomless pits, flippers that require good, quick movement, and these balls on a tightrope that you need to cross right at the end of the stage. Definitely an iconic stage from this game, as this is definitely a difficulty spike that this game's younger audience would get stuck on. Speedway 2 is more Speedway. There's more obstacles on this stage than the first Speedway, but with the exception of these gates that are pretty easy to avoid if you're going fast, all things considered, the obstacles on this stage are concentrated on 2 key moments in the stage. Next is Night Bounce 1. It's Bounce 1 at nighttime. This stage reintroduces the disappearing platforms from the original Hamsterball, which is pretty important since you'll be seeing it a lot in this game. But it's just a retread of Bounce 1, nothing interesting to note here. After this is Circuit 1, which, I'm going to say it right now, the circuit levels are my least favorite levels in the game. The gimmick for these levels is quite simple. There's a lap counter, so you have to go through the level that many times in order to finish the stage. This one is the worst of these stages, mainly because it has the most laps at 4. You're going through the same 30-second long stage 4 separate times, and the only place where the laps could differ in a major way from each other is the end, where there are 2 separate paths at the end, one of them having 2 ways to get onto it. Overall, not a fun stage. Thankfully, these stages aren't too common in the game. After that, Speedway 3 is another fairly relaxing time. It's very similar to Speedway 2, but it's distinct enough that it gets a pass. It doesn't feel like the same layouts are being used here, which is good. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, Night Bounce 2 is like Night Bounce 1, but for Bounce 2. I know, very original. After this is Puzzle 1, which is a very short level. This level is interesting because, look at this layout. Remember Practice 2 from the beginning of the video? This layout is very similar to that level's layout. I hope you're starting to notice a trend with this game's levels because it's not going to go away anytime soon. But before we can get to that, this is around the time that you unlock the third and final hamster of the group, Spiked. This is the most context-specific hamster of the bunch. Have you noticed these iron grates occasionally blocking off potential paths for you to take? Well, you press the X button on the controller and your ball glows silver for a few seconds. During this time, if you hit one of these grates, or some other similar objects from later in this game, they will break, allowing you through. Next is Bounce 3. It acts like a greatest hits album of the first 2 Bounce levels, and it flows surprisingly well. It does still feel like you're stitching 2 levels together, which isn't helped by the fact that the latter of the 2 levels layout was just seen 2 levels ago. It's an alright stage though. After that is Speedway 4, which has a very unique design early on, with these spheres and gates and branching paths. It's really cool, which is a shame because the second half of the stage is essentially note for note Speedway 1. This is the first stage where the average player could have trouble discerning the 2 levels, considering that they also have very similar visual themes. Thankfully, this next stage is fully new. This is Gravity 1. Guess what the gimmick of this stage is? Yep, it's an anti-gravity gimmick. The level plays around this gimmick pretty well, and it does feel like the gimmick makes the level more cohesive. However, I don't like this particular level. The big reason is this tube of moving platforms right at the beginning of the level. It takes a while to get through these, which makes falling off really punishing. This game gives the player the freedom to go fast elsewhere in the game, so to see it taken away here definitely hurts the level. Puzzle 2 is Puzzle 1, but mirrored. There's these new robot-like toys that swing a crane arm and stomp around, which is notable because they appear a lot later on. However, this stage is basically the same as the last puzzle. Next is Night Speedway. This is another night version of a pre-existing level, this time being Speedway 1. The level gimmick does actually change this level meaningfully, as you have to really pay attention to how you're moving, as some of the guardrails will vanish, causing you to fly off the track if you're not prepared. Next is Glacier 1. It's an ice level. So, how does a game that already has somewhat janky controls handle a gimmick designed to make controls more slippery? Actually, it handles it decently well. As expected, at slow speeds, turning on ice takes some extra force. However, the game generously leaves the edges uncovered, allowing the player to make some last-minute saves. In these sections, the ice does make you harder to control, but the challenge feels fair in a way that is surprisingly well crafted. On the faster sections, the ice allows you to roll down faster than what would normally be possible, and actually makes it easier to adjust for obstacles while maintaining your speed. As for the level itself, it's fun. The most notable thing about this level are these pistons, which push you into the pit, but that's about it. Next is Gravity 2. This level is much better than Gravity 1. This level is definitely more traditional than its predecessor, but it still plays around with the anti-gravity in interesting ways and uses the gravity to warp the level's route, allowing the level to come together in very appealing ways structurally. Next is Night Puzzle 1. Funny how that works. As it turns out, the 2 most derivative level tropes in the game have come together to create something that's actually pretty unique. This level has a lot of stairs, and its ending has a gimmick where the final few platforms are bridged by disappearing bridges using the level's neon gimmick. It's actually a pretty cool level. After that is Night Gravity 1, and Night's back to being derivative. There isn't any night stuff in this level at all. This is just Gravity 2 with some rearranged objects and set at nighttime. This level was already in space! Making it night doesn't do much to change it aesthetically! After that is Glacier 2, which is actually a pretty long level. This level's actually surprisingly difficult, and a large part of that can be traced down to the level's combination of smaller platforms and the ice gimmick. It's cool, but it's definitely a difficulty spike and should have been placed later in the game. Actually, scratch that. Night Puzzle 2 also falls around a similar difficulty level. This level also makes heavy use of smaller platforms in combination with its normal gimmick, this time being the neon platforms. This level tests your ability to control your ball. If you move too slow, you won't be able to cross the disappearing platforms. If you move too fast, you'll fall off them. And the section turntable with blocks on it? Yeah, this is a test of control to be sure. And to cap off this trilogy of levels that feel like they are a lot more difficult than the levels around them, Circuit 2 is a test of patience. It's another circuit level, this time with only 3 laps, which makes it better. Unfortunately, there are these spinners that have spikes on all sides, requiring you to be careful in this section. Thankfully, Jumper can skip this section easily. There's also these 2 wheels, which I'm convinced are just here to slow you down. I don't have much else to say about this level, other than I still don't like circuit levels. Night Puzzle 3 does bring the difficulty back down, and I quite like this one. You're going downhill in what is roughly a square the whole time, and I quite like it. Even though this level mostly takes place outdoors, I feel like the ball is moving in and out of a building throughout the level. Why is that? You'll see. Next is Gravity 3, and similar to Bounce 3, this is a greatest hits of the first 2 Gravity levels, which means this came back. After that is Night Puzzle 4. This is another long level, and a lot of that is due to these spirals. It does reuse some assets from previous levels, but it's so sparse with those reused sections and feels so fresh in terms of how it plays that it gets a pass from me. There's also this variant of the presses from the Tubular and Night levels, although this one is vertical rather than horizontal. That's neat. This level also introduces these scoops, which are going to be important later. Next is Night Circuit, which is a very long level for a circuit. It's only 2 laps and shares more layout-wise with the puzzle levels than the actual circuit levels. There's also this long stretch of large, empty space. I wonder why that's there. Oh, and just like Night Gravity, there aren't any night gimmicks here. That's kind of a waste of the theme. Glacier 3 is up next, which is actually a lot easier than Glacier 2. It's shorter for starters, and while the level's half-pipes are smaller than Glacier 2's, the manual sections don't get nearly as hard as that levels do. After that is Night Gravity 2. It's Gravity 3 with the same changes made to it that Night Gravity 1 made to Gravity 2. Meaning, this section appears for a 3rd time. Yay! But with that out of the way, we have reached Puzzle's endgame. These last 4 levels are the ultimate levels, and as the name would suggest, they are the ultimate test of everything you've learned in this game. Ultimate 1 has a mechanical theme, and it's easily the shortest of the 4 levels, as evidenced by the fact that it's the only Ultimate level whose base timer isn't 210 seconds, it's 160 seconds. However, it is still just as difficult as the other levels, as it uses the smaller scale to its advantage. That's right, this level's overall theme is testing game mechanics with smaller platforms that are harder to maneuver on. Early on in the level, the player hears the foreboding sound of metal striking the ground. This isn't an obstacle the player has heard before. Is it a new obstacle being introduced at the last minute? Nope! The vertical presses, which only appeared in Night Puzzle 4 before this level, are back in full swing, this time with their own dedicated sound effect. Anyways, once you get past that level, you move on to the next level, Ultimate 2. This level is flower themed, and feels significantly more calm due to the theme. This level brings back the scoops, and hold on, this level design seems familiar. Yep, this level is Night Puzzles 1 and 3 stitched together. Remember how I was talking about how Night Puzzle 3 felt like it was part of a building? That's because it is in this level. Both level sections are harder, which makes sense, it is the endgame, but this is the most vanilla feeling of the Ultimate levels. Ultimate 3. Are you kidding me? This is Night Circuit again. That empty section was filled and the level is mirrored, but this is the same level which already necessitated that you play it twice, appearing at the end of the game. Yeah, it's a circuit level, and it goes for a magenta and green style. It doesn't really work. Now for the grand finale, Ultimate 4 takes place in a circus. This level is easily the strongest with its theme in the entire game. I mean, every obstacle is decorated to match the theme. This level easily has the most gimmicks of these Ultimate levels, and it even has split paths dedicated to these specific gimmicks, including the disappearing platforms and the ice gimmicks. This level is easily one of my favorites in the game. It's such a good level, the PS3 can barely handle it. I mentioned I was emulating this earlier, but on real hardware, this level lags quite a bit. That's a minor thing because this level manages to take most of the concepts from the rest of the game and makes them work together, and that makes for the perfect conclusion to the game's main mode. Now, that's not quite the end. The main hustle run is over, but there are 2 bonus levels, the Labyrinth bonuses. They are as the name describes, maze levels. Neither are anything too special, and they aren't meant to be. They are fun challenges to get more out of the game once someone beats it, and that's kind of important, as there isn't much else to this game. Oh yeah, there was one last mode to talk about, Race. It allows you to, as the name suggests, race with one other player through a selection of hustle tracks. It's a shame that not all of them work, but given how poor a few of these levels run on PS3, maybe that was for the best. And yeah, that's Hamsterball PS3. It's a fun game, albeit a short one. I grew up with this game and it is held tight with a lot of my childhood memories. I still go back to play this every once in a while because, beyond the nostalgia behind it, it still is decently fun and only takes a few hours to go through again. I recommend playing it, but as I had mentioned earlier, there's a real ethical dilemma to be had when it comes to how this game treats Raptisoft's original work. If you can't look past that, that makes sense. Thanks for watching this video. This took me a while to make, but I simply just wanted to talk about a game I liked that not many people have talked about. I don't know how often I'll be making these types of videos, but this is something I have wanted to make for a while. Feel free to discuss this game in the comments and give me feedback on this video. Alright, stay safe everybody.